welcome to Education 1.5, whereby we continue to discuss about the Education Amendment Act. My name is Clement Chizio and I'm a host. Joining me for this conversation is Vongai Isechangamire, an education financing specialist, and Jefta Changmi from World Vision. Maybe to start the conversation, Vongai Ishe, you can expand to us what does compulsory basic state funding means?
Thank you, Clemens. Compulsory basic state-funded education means that, let's break it down. I'll start with basic state-funded education. Basic state-funded education means that the state is providing a package for children in government schools to be able to be in school and stay in school. This package that hasn't been yet fully determined may include school fees, infrastructure, teaching and learning materials. Back to compulsory. Compulsory means that it's a must to be in school.
Meaning every children should be in school.
Every child should be in school, exactly. So it means that because the state has obligated itself to providing a basic package that enables a child to access school and remain in school and as well as complete school. By basic, we are also saying that this is ECD to Form 4. And we are also talking about adult education that is up to Form 4, meaning that adults who have not accessed education at their school-going age can access education up to Form 4.
So you're saying even adults can access the education for free up to Form 4?
Exactly. And this is mainly because we are also talking about schools being non-formal education centers right now. So schools have expanded from formal, but to also including non-formal education up to Form 4. And what we are looking at then, it means that parents are obligated to take their children in school. They cannot deprive access to education for their children because now the government is saying there is a basic package that we are willing to provide for you to be able to take your children to school. And as such, if parents do not then keep up to this obligation, it means that there are going to be, repercussions.
And what are the repercussions?
This means that if you do not take your child to school, you may be sentenced. You are going to be sentenced. I can't say maybe, because now it's stipulated in the Act that you will be sentenced to 6 years in prison. And this is very important for parents to note this obligation, because previously, we have heard thousands and thousands of children falling out of school or not attending school because the parents would have said, oh, my beliefs, in religion or whatever, in culture, do not allow a 15-year-old girl to attend school. Now it means that we are expecting compulsory attendance for education for every child, because in government schools, they are able to access that education.
Thank you, Vangaishe. Coming to you, Jefta, why is it important for government to provide this basic state-funded education?
I think firstly what we need to understand as a nation is that the provision of state-funded education is not like the state is doing us a favor. It is a constitutional obligation which is stipulated in Section 75 of the Supreme Law, that every citizen of Zimbabwe is entitled to basic state-funded education. So the Act is just fulfilling the constitutional mandate which we have. And I want to say this is a very progressive Act, the Education Amendment Act, because it is addressing some of the fundamental problems that we have always been facing as a community, as a society, especially if we look at the cost of education to the poor. We had a system in which children from poor backgrounds are continuously, subjected to a lot of challenges in accessing basic education. And yet we always take education as the ultimate route to, break circles of poverty and other things like that. But it has been an issue for children from poor backgrounds to go to school. And that should not happen in a constitutional democracy like Zimbabwe. So this is the most important part. With this Amendment Act, we are guaranteeing education for every child, irrespective of the state of your pocket or where you are coming from. If the state is providing for that education, at least you get the basic. And that can take you out of, that can empower you as a citizen. Education is what our children need right now to address most of the challenges that we face as a society. And I want to make it more practical for people to really understand what it means for children to access education. We had a situation in which children from poor families, constantly they're chased out of classroom. Here and there, that warden, a teacher or someone is coming to classroom and saying, you haven't paid your school fees, go back home. Why should a child be punished for the parents' inability to pay school fees? Children don't choose families. It's something that comes natural, and I should not be punished for, being raised from a poor family. It should be the government that should take up that responsibility. Of course, not taking away the parental responsibility to provide other necessities that are needed for children's welfare. But at least when it comes to education, let it be guaranteed for everyone. It doesn't matter you are poor, it doesn't matter you are rich. We need equal access to education. And then what they do with that education becomes, their own doing in terms of how they take it up. Yeah. But this is the most important thing that we are celebrating right now. Yeah. No child will be, subjected to ill treatment and all the undignified, kind of treatment because they failed to
yes.
pay school fees.
Quite progressive there. But one of the fundamental challenges of African countries, Zimbabwe included, has been the issue of coming up with very good policies, but very poor at implementation. Do you foresee any challenges in implementing this basic state-funded education?
Firstly, what we need to understand is that these children, what they're asking for is not much. It's not even a lot of resources to begin with. If we look at the total expenditure that will incur if we provide basic state-funded education to these children versus other expenditures that we incur as a country, you will realize that we spend, it's almost insignificant. I can confidently call it that. Yes, we have funding challenges as a country, but I don't doubt our capacity to provide school fees for our children. The moment we start to create excuses for that, then we are failing as a society. As a collective humanity, we need to make sure that we take this upon ourselves and say, this is what we need to do, and we are doing it for our children. We are not doing them a favor. We are providing a basic right that is provided in the Constitution. I don't foresee challenges. Yes, of course, just like any other change that may happen, there's always bound to be resistance and challenges here and there. But I don't doubt the capacity of Zimbabwe to provide free education to our children.
Thank you, Jeff. This is Education 1.5. Don't you go away. Welcome back. This is Education 1.5, whereby we are continuing our discussion on the Education Amendment Act, and today we are talking about the compulsory basic state-funded education. When we wrapped up in the last segment, Jeff, you were talking about the state being able, in terms of implementation. Vongaishe, maybe you can come in. What are the implementation modalities that can be put in place so that this basic state-funded education can come into place?
So let's go back to what the Supreme Law says and what the Education Act says. Already it stipulates both these regulatory frameworks, stipulates that the state should progressively, provide education.
And what does it mean to say
progressively? Means that the state is obligating itself to creating a transitional strategy or a development strategy to eventually provide. So this means it's not happening overnight. That is for sure. But it means that when we have placed an act, it comes with statutory tools that are attached to it. And right now, since we are talking about basic state-funded education, it is then essential that we start, as a country, processes of developing an Education Fund Act or an Education Financing Act, meaning that we need to place practical ways of operationalizing, contextualized within the country. This means that we need to start domesticating mobilization of funds, using the resources that we have. If we are earmarking taxes to mining or transport or whatever it is, we need to figure out what works for the country so that we have a sustainable pool of funding. Because we understand that the cost of education may not be much, but eventually it needs to have a pot of funding that continuously funds education and ensures that generations and generations of Zimbabweans are able to access education. So this is what it means. So the next step right now is to eventually put down some sort of fund that has a sustainable mechanism of financing to be able to fund this basic funded
This fund
education.
you're talking about, Mongai, is it different from the basic education assistance module?
The BIM is a safety net, and safety net means it's a program that is filling in a certain gap within a specific area. The BIM, by the way, is basic education assistance module, right? And Jeff, you can come in terms of how then does it mean, the BIM will be structured?
BIM will have to remain there because what basic state-funded education will cover will be something different with what BIM will cover. BIM will come into closing some of the gaps. If children attend school without paying school fees, for instance, but it doesn't end there. There are other hidden costs for children to access quality education. They still need uniforms, for instance, and of course other teaching and learning materials. And vulnerable children will always struggle to have access to that. It's not an easy thing to be the only child who's not wearing a uniform out of 800 children at a primary school. So these are things that BIM should continue to cushion. But I think in the administration of BIM as a program itself, as we continue, we may also need to reflect and take out the lessons that we got from the initial phase of rolling out the BIM as an exercise. For instance, we will need to strengthen accountability and making sure that the money and the resources that are channeled towards the resources are reaching the intended beneficiaries. And that is the actual children that are vulnerable that are benefiting from that. And then we make sure that we then identify the critical needs of the children, subject to the context in which those children are. And we try and assist holistically the children's needs for them to get what we call the quality education that we need. We know we have so far done a lot of progress, including us amending this act, but at the same time, in terms of operationalizing, this on the ground, it means we need to be there, identify where the gaps are, and then BIM will then come in and fill in. So it has to exist and it has to continue.
We have come to an end of this segment, and we have discussed about the existence of both BIM and the basic state-funded education, where Mungai said there's need for us to have modalities to make sure that we do have a fund that makes sure that the basic state-funded education comes to fruition. Don't go away. We'll continue this discussion. Welcome back. This is Education 1.5. We are now joined in the conversation by Reverend Taylor Nyanete, the Executive Director of ZNCWC. Reverend, we've been talking about the compulsory basic state-funded education, and now want to discuss how best can we make it work.
I think for government, for the state, to ensure that there is adequate funding, the Ministry of Education's vote, in my view, has to be separated. The salaries for teachers, in my view, should be moved from the ministry's vote to Public Service Commission, who are the employers of civil servants. Then once that is done, it then leaves us with how much or the actual that is going into the child's education. This has to be done immediately, separating the two. Because at the moment, when you look at the budget, as much as government is saying we are funding education, but the bulk of it has been going to
salaries.
Yeah, recurrent expenditure, in particular salaries. So that picture is not showing well. We need to know what goes to the child in terms of the actual benefit.
True.
So I think we need to separate that. Local authorities, who are an important stakeholder in education in the country, are exempted in many aspects of taxation to ensure that whatever they are putting into education is not taxed, and it's also recognized by the state itself whenever a local authority puts a budget into infrastructure development. And for me, that taxation should come in from anything to do with infrastructure, particularly the construction of a school, even the materials. The source of those materials should not even be taxed, as long as it's going into education.
Yes, Rev, you're bringing a very important aspect on local authorities. And Vongai, you've also mentioned when you spoke about the need for creation of a fund. Now, how can we put this in context with the current discussion that is going on right now in terms of devolution?
Devolution is trying to ensure that local authorities exercise their mandate to the maximum or to the optimum. And there's less bureaucracy in terms of work or engagements that have to do with the state and also with local authorities. So the local authorities need to have that framework where they're able to operate with maximum or with minimum interference from the state in terms of infrastructure development. The role of the state should remain one of the legal framework and policy framework, and it ends there. The rest has to go to the local authorities, so that they ensure that they adequately provide the basic services. And education is one of the very important rights for anyone.
True.
And the good part about education, it empowers each and every individual. And eventually, the individuals then contribute to the gross domestic product of a country.
Thank you. Thank you for those submissions. Vongai, earlier on you spoke about the compulsory-based state-funded education covering ECD to the fourth form. What then happens when somebody finishes Form 4 and is not able to pay for A-level or to go to university? What then happens?
So if we really look at why basic education is now up to Form 4, it's because the understanding is that by O-level you would have gained a skill to either move into the different branches of transitioning. So these different branches of transitioning might mean one may go to A-level, one may go to vocational, or one may start a diploma or a certificate, or even get into, the artisanry work. What's important there, Clemens, is to also understand that the government, the state, has also recognized the need of supporting what we are calling further education. And further education, we are talking about A-level and upwards. Again, the state is also saying they will do whatever they can in the limits of the resources to support the vulnerable ones who cannot proceed to the branches of furthering their education. So I think it's important to also realize that within this act, there is a realization that there is a possibility of someone wanting to go to A-level or someone wanting to go to vocational or even starting to work. But within that, we are also saying that at all levels, you have gained a certain skill that you're able to then contribute to the economy, of the country. We were talking earlier on about BIM. These are some of the things that a safety net would be possible to fill in those gaps.
Okay.
So we have already talked about how BIM in its current structure is covering school fees and some of the basic packages that basic state-funded education is intending to provide. This means that it forces the BIM to evolve, to start contextualizing what are the gaps within the basic state-funded education that would ensure learners to further their education if they need to.
Thank you, Wongais. Maybe, Reverend, before we wrap up, maybe you may want to come in on this one?
Yes, as much as the state is an obligation, parents also do have an obligation to ensure that children have access to education. They have a role to play in contributing to a child's education. But I think the part they have played in the majority, and for me since 1996 when the structural adjustment program came into play, is that parents have contributed the majority of their children's education. And I think that has to be recognized.
True.
But also going forward, what contribution are they going to make? Or can they make? I think they are still willing to play a part. But I think it has to be clearly outlined what is that part and how the state will recognize it.
True.
And one way of recognizing it is whenever parents also contribute in taxes in some form, that recognition of their contribution is also to be recognized in the form of a waiver. Then we would see both the state and the parents contributing in a better way to the education of children in Zimbabwe.
Right, and just to jump in, I think you're exactly right. So at some point, we are also saying that if you have been assisted to take your child up to O level, then as a parent, you've been obligated to take your child to complete an education. So eventually you're also supposed, it's a subsidy, right?
Yeah.
When you're being subsidized, it means there's a saving you're making. If the parents were providing a larger amount to, the education budget, indirectly or directly, it also means that going forward for further education, they are also obligated to ensure that their children also finish up their education.
So earlier on, you spoke of a sentence of parents for failure to send their kids to school. And does it now apply to those who would have finished O-level?
So not necessarily, because this is beyond basic education. But again, what we are also saying is that obligation is still there. I feel as a parent, you do not necessarily need a state to make an arrest threat for you to better your child. So it still becomes a huge responsibility to ensure that they are choosing whatever branch they are choosing and they are supporting the child to do so. For the sentence, it's mostly because compulsory basic state-funded education is up to Form 4, where we are saying this is a critical point of a citizen and a child to gain a skill and functional literacy for them to be able to contribute to the larger scope of the economy. So exactly, so it means that we are really tightening that bit so that each and every citizen has a level of functional literacy that's equal at the point that they leave their O levels.
Thank you. We are coming to an end of our discussion today. Maybe Rev, you can have just a few minutes to wrap up.
Yeah, we want to commend government for amending the Education Act. It's positive, it's progressive, it's in line with the Constitution, and we want that implemented in full. And we're looking into 2021. The budget should reflect the amendments.
Understood. Any last words?
I think exactly as Rev said, it's now time for us to implement this. It's very progressive, and we see our education getting better. We see thousands and thousands of children who are out of school getting back into the formal system, and we also see even adults who missed out on school being able to access education, which is really a good thing for the country.
Thank you, Mongaishe. Thank you, Rev. We have come to an end of today's episode, whereby we were discussing about the basic state-funded education. And one of the key points that came out was that the basic state-funded education covers from ECD up to the fourth form. And one key note that I want you to note is that it's now compulsory and it carries a tendency for you not to send your kid to school. Let's meet in the next episode and let's continue the conversation online. #EducationAct.